So this is basically a brief video about the Matrix. As to say, we're living more likely in a simulated universe and world than the real world. And I'll start off with Professor James Gates, what he talked about the superstring theory, as shows.
It's New York City. It's March 7th.
Well, partly it's taken to these very strange images that are behind your head right now. These are pictures of equations. I've been, for the last 15 years, trying to answer the kinds of questions that my colleagues have been raising. And what I've come to understand is that there are these incredible pictures that contain all the information of a set of equations that are related to string theory. And it's even more bizarre than that, because when you then try to understand these pictures, you find out that buried in them are computer codes just like the type that you find in a browser when you go surf the web.
You're saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers.
That is correct. So
Wait, I have to just be silent for a minute here. So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code. You're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. That's what we find very, very deeply inside the equations that occur in string theory and in general in systems that we could say are supersymmetric.
Basically, he was explaining that the fundamental physics of nature, or the basis of nature, what she found in the superstring theory of the cosmos, which is basically the story of our life, or the main frame of our life, is to say that he found codes of bits and ones and zeros, which are the same that you find in search engines and browsers. That describes the fundamental nature of life. Now that's a big thing to say that we're living in a simulation. It's not right what they found, which is why they were shocked when he turned around and said that he found ones and zeros and the coding to search engines and the internet found in the superstring theory of life. And that's basically to say that we live in a simulation more likely than the real world, from what he found and what he was trying to say. Going on to the explanation of what the Matrix is as described by the film. It's a controlled dream world simulation where you can't wake up. The Morpheus quote, which asks if you've ever had a dream that you felt so real, and imagine if you couldn't wake up from that dream, if it was a controlled dream. How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world, if that was the case?
And they fill it with their subconscious.
How could I ever acquire enough detail to make them think that it's reality?
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right? It's only when we wake up that we realize something was actually strange. Let me ask you a question. You never really remember the beginning of a dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
I guess, yeah.
So how did we end up here?
Well, we just came from the,
Think about it, Ariadne. How did you get here? Where are you right now?
We're dreaming?
You're actually in the middle of the workshop right now, sleeping. This is your first lesson in shared dreaming. Stay calm.
It's just a dream, then why were you...
Because it's never just a dream, is it? And a face full of glass hurts like hell. When you're in it feels real.
Have you ever had a dream that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
This can't be.
Be what? Be real?
Explanation of neuroscience, which is basically our brains, and as Morpheus explains, what you can smell, taste and touch is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. That's the same as if you take away the matrix simulation and you imagine now this is real life. Well, when you touch something or when you smell or taste something, basically that's the neurons in your brain speaking to the nerves in your body, or in the through your nose, your eyesight, everything, to tell you what you're seeing and touching, sensing and smelling.
Right now, we're inside a computer program?
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your
If the
brain.
neurons weren't active, you wouldn't be able to feel those. And that's based on neuroscience and the consciousness of our brain. Avatars and digital projections. Basically, in the Matrix, we're digital avatars, mental projections of ourselves in the dream. And in this controlled dream, our real selves are plugged into the outside world in those pods, as what shows in the film. You're basically asleep in a coma type state, and you're basically unable to wake because of that coma based dream. And in this dream where you can't wake up, that feels so real because you can't wake up from it.
Right now, we're inside a computer program?
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
The story of what happened between man and machine is explained on the Matrix, or the Animatrix, even more. Basically, there was a man v machine war, as brief to say, and because the machines use solar power to recharge themselves to keep themselves alive, the humans used Operation Dark Storm, which is basically scorching the skies with dark smoke to block off the sunlight, the UV light, so the machines would die out and won't recharge.
Conceived of their most desperate strategy yet. A final solution. The destruction of the sky.
We have only bits and pieces of information, but what we know for certain is that at some point in the early 21st century, all of mankind was united in celebration. We marveled at our own magnificence as we gave birth to AI.
AI. An artificial intelligence.
A singular consciousness that spawned an entire race of machines. We don't know who struck first, us or them, but we know that it was us that scorched the sky. At the time, they were dependent on solar power, and it was believed that they would be unable to survive without an energy source as abundant as the sun. Throughout human history, we have been dependent on machines to survive. Fate, it seems, is not without a sense of irony.
Thus would man try to cut the machines off from the sun, their main energy source. May there be mercy on man and machine for their
Now
sins.
that's basically what the film Animatrix and the Matrix briefly explains as to what happened and why in the real world we're basically plugged in, because they, as I go on to explain, the machines used us, salvaged us from the bioelectrics in our body to basically keep them alive. Our bodies produce around, I think it's 120 volts of electric through the heart and the brain, the biological electrics of the body. And basically our heart and brain are producing a lot of electricity. Now, because they didn't have the sun anymore to keep them charged, especially the mainframe of City-01, what they did, as the film explains, is they used people's bodies, plugged them in to the Matrix, a Matrix simulated dream world, which they salvaged from DARPA, and then they used us to believe that we're in the real world. And so when we're plugged in, we basically are producing electricity and keeping them.
Every moment of every day, your heart is having a conversation with your brain. Every human heart, around the heart, is a field of energy. 5 to 8 feet, 2 to 3 meters diameter. And this field of energy can be measured now in ways that make it very useful to us. The Institute of Heart Math has designed equipment that will help us to measure this field. Every moment of every day, your heart is sending signals to your brain, telling your brain what kind of energy to send to your body. Every moment of every day, there is a signal from your heart to your brain. What we now know is, when I was in school and when many of our listeners were in school, we were taught that this is a physical reality made of atoms, and our atoms would look like little solar systems. They were modeled as little solar systems, things in the middle called a nucleus with other things orbiting them like electrons, and those days are long gone. We now look at atoms rather than things orbiting around other things. We look at them as concentrations of energy in space and time, where there are no clear-cut things. Now, where this gets important is that scientists, and this is in the standard physics textbooks, this is no surprise what I'm about to say, is that if you change the field of energy that the atom lives in, you change the atom. You can change that field electrically, or you can change it magnetically. And there are terms for the effects. The Zeeman effect, the Stark effect are well-documented effects of electrical and magnetic changes in the field that change the atom. Where, while it sounds technical and maybe not relevant, where it gets really relevant very fast is our hearts are the strongest bioelectrical and magnetic field generators in our bodies. Our hearts generate stronger electrical fields than our brains. They generate stronger magnetic fields than our brains. Our hearts are 5,000 times as powerful magnetically than our brains. And we hear about EKGs of our hearts. They're up to 100 times stronger than the EEG, the electrical information in our brains.
The human body generates more bioelectricity than a 120-volt battery and over 25,000 BTUs of body heat. Combined with a form of fusion, the machines had found all the energy they would ever need. There are fields here, endless fields, where human beings are no longer born. We are grown. I came to realize the obviousness of the truth. What is the Matrix? Control. The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world, built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into this.
Because they have no sunlight to recharge anymore. Now 7 billion people times 120 volts, or whatever it is per person, that's going to produce a lot of electricity like a generator. And that's basically what they're doing, and while we're plugged into this dream, and what's in control dream, where we can't wake up, a simulation. What explains, which would be the questions of, well, what about animals, horses, dogs, sheep, cats, chickens, etc. Basically what's explained through Morpheus on the one of the scenes of the film, even though it shows an agent, when they freeze it, basically there's sentient software programs which are artificial intelligence. So animals would be like the Nintendogs, what you get on those games, or Tamagotchi, if you remember those. They're basically artificial software where the neurons in our body can feel the fur, etc. But they're just software copies with a high advanced artificial intelligent consciousness where it makes you believe they're real.
This isn't the Matrix.
No. It's another training program designed to teach you one thing. If you are not one of us, you are one of them.
What are they?
Sentient programs. They can move in and out of any software still hardwired to their system.
But they're not. And dogs, cats, all animals, even insects would just be just software. And they're not even real. So that's something that you need to understand. Basically, the only things that are real in the Matrix are the real people who are plugged in. But it will be basically real people working amongst artificial intelligent consciousness people, which is sentient programs. And you can't tell who is and who isn't, basically. And it's just what would explain sentient programs and sentient software, artificial intelligent consciousness amongst real consciousness in this simulated dream world. Moving on to physics. Basically, if you look at objects, how they sit, if you look at a box, object sitting on a table or on a mantelpiece, your brain's playing a splinter on your mind, because your mind's saying the physics don't look quite right. Now, because your mind's noticing the physics don't look quite right of how that box or that object is sitting, is basically the Matrix physics, where it's showing through, and it's not to its 110% accuracy of real life physics. And that's why your mind's asking, why is that object not sitting right? And if you notice at night time, when you look at that object, you've noticed that there's a grainy, glittery kind of material showing through, which is most likely the Matrix coding. That if you zoom that in like a microscopical view, you would see the coding of ones and zeros, or many other different forms of coding. And that's basically the Matrix, explained as brief as possible. If you want to look more into it, or if you believe, or you have more interest in looking into the Matrix simulation, check out the linked videos in the description, or just go onto my channel, and there's quite a few that explain more in depth into why we're living in a simulation more than the real world. So thanks for listening.